Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1984 cult classic, C.H.U.D. Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers. They're not staying down there anymore. Now, C.H.U.D is one of my all-time favorite films, actually. I really enjoy this movie. This is a film that I personally feel is underrated. I think it definitely is deserving of its cult status among horror fans. I definitely do feel it's one of those cult classics that deserves that term and deserves that title. But I also think that it's a legitimately good movie. I don't think it's just an example of, oh, it's so bad it's good fun, or, oh, it's just a B movie. I think it's a film that takes a B movie script and a B movie plot, but it adds so much more to that with its talented cast and its Larry Cohen-esque screenplay that has some really genuinely nice witty bits that are interspersed throughout it. And it's a genuinely clever movie in a lot of different ways. And it's memorable. It's a film that definitely has a staying power because people still talk about it to this day. What's interesting about my love for C.H.U.D is that it didn't start out that way. I mean, I didn't start out loving this movie. I saw it on VHS for the first time years ago, and I thought it was okay. I thought it was alright. There were things about it that I really loved. I loved the idea. I loved the premise. I liked John Hurt. I liked Daniel Stern. I liked the rest of the cast. But I just didn't really get the forced bits of humor. Like some guy yelling, "Somebody call the Ghostbusters!" Or some guy off screen yelling "dickhead" over and over again. I didn't really get that. Or the whole scene where the father gets eaten by a C.H.U.D and then there's something about over the phone as if, oh, somebody's had bad chili again or something like that. It was just one of those things that was like, what is this? Like, why is this here? And I didn't like the ending either because I felt it was abrupt and it was just an ending where John Goodman and this other guy are at a diner and they get eaten by these C.H.U.Ds, and I'm like, what is this? So I just thought it was an okay movie. It wasn't until years later when I saw the cut that ended up being on the Anchor Bay DVD, which is the version of the film as it was intended to be seen according to the people who made it, because there was stuff that was added. All that stuff was added by the studio and other people to, I guess, get more people into the theater. I don't know what it was. The theatrical cut of the film is vastly different than the integral cut. And the integral cut is a vastly superior cut of the film. C.H.U.D is one of those movies where the director's cut or the alternate cut actually is a lot better than the theatrical cut, and it makes a huge difference in how the film is perceived. When I saw the theatrical cut, I wasn't really that impressed, except for some of the, the effects for the low budget and the whole premise of it and the story and all of that. But when I saw the integral cut on DVD, I was blown away by the film, and I absolutely fell in love with it at that moment in time. Because everything makes sense now. The diner scene is actually in the right place. The humor doesn't feel like it's forced. There's it doesn't feel like there's two different screenplays going on. The film actually feels like it's focused. And it makes all the difference in the world. I just wanted to throw that out there real quick before I start the rest of this review, because C.H.U.D is a film that I definitely do have a lot of love for, and this just goes to show you it does help to actually give some things another chance sometimes, or watch different cuts of films, because you could have an instance like C.H.U.D where you watch a different cut of the movie and it just completely changes your viewpoint on the film. Now, C.H.U.D is a 1984 horror film that in a lot of ways is more of a sci-fi movie. It takes more of a science fiction approach than a strictly horror approach, which is a big reason why the film is so successful and why it works as well as it does. The film is directed by Douglas Cheek, who has not directed anything since, which is really too bad. I don't really understand why he wasn't given another project to do after C.H.U.D. He's definitely shows that he knows how to do this kind of work. He is a master at setting up his shots in this, using the locations really well, the sets and the setting, and working well with his crew. It's just one of those things where I don't get it. He did an amazing job bringing this story to life, this absurd story to life, and all he got in terms of jobs after this was directing documentaries years down the road and narrating a Walmart documentary. It's just one of those things. It's like, this is a guy who clearly was talented and showed it with this movie, with his work on C.H.U.D, and he got no callbacks, got nothing. Maybe it was something that he chose. It was a decision that he made himself. I don't know for sure, but I do know that he definitely deserved more shots at doing other movies, at least in my personal opinion. The film has a screenplay by Parnell Hall, who, according to Douglas Cheek and producer Andrew Bonheim, they had been working on this concept for C.H.U.D for 4 years. So, ever since 1980. And this is a script that I feel is quite admirable. It's a script that, like I said, it takes this B-movie concept of these mutants in the sewers, these monsters in the sewers, and has some nice commentary, social commentary at times within it, as well as a nice sense of humor. And it does a great job with its characters. The characters who you follow throughout much of the movie: George Cooper, the Reverend, Captain Bosch, the villain, Wilson, so there's a lot of just really solid character development in this. There's not like a lot of backstory, but there's a lot of moments with these characters where they have their own charisma, they have their own distinct personalities, which is really nice to see. And it's the kind of thing that I honestly miss in a lot of films today. I feel a lot of films today are missing that charisma and that likability that a lot of the characters in this film had. And like I said earlier, it is very reminiscent of Larry Cohen, and that's another reason why I like the film so much and why I appreciate and admire the script by Parnell Hall, because of the fact that it is so clearly inspired by Larry Cohen, who is one of my favorite filmmakers and one of my favorite screenwriters. And depending on who you hear, who you hear this from, there is some kind of controversy regarding who is responsible for most of the script. In a wonderful audio commentary on this Blu-ray, as well as on the DVD from Anchor Bay, Daniel Stern, well, he was one of the stars, Daniel Stern and Christopher Curry, they were apparently displeased with Parnell Hall's rewritten script, and rewrote it extensively, added the character of the Reverend and the alternate C.H.U.D acronym. That is a nice little twist at the end of the film. They claim about 50% of the film is their rewrite, but they chose to remain uncredited. But then there's some controversy because Andrew Bonheim, who's the producer, he says that Parnell Hall is the one that came up with the acronym, the alternate acronym. So there's a little, like I said, depending on who you hear it from, it seems like there might have been some rewrites. Well, whoever it was that wrote the majority of this script, they did a fantastic job. They did a great job with it. It's one of the best scripts I can think of for a low-budget film like this. Because it really was a low-budget production, and it cost $1.25 million, which really, to this day, isn't a lot of money for a movie. And they got a lot out of it. And it helps that they had such a great crew. You had some really just legendary effects artists who worked on the film. You had John Callaghan, who would go on to win an Oscar for Dick Tracy for his makeup effects for that movie. You had Ed French, who had done a bunch of other effects for a lot of other films, past and present. You had Tom Boxell, I think it was Tom or Tim Boxell, who directed the underrated creature feature Aberration, and he was also recommended to work on the creature designs by Dan O'Bannon, who helped write the original screenplay for Alien and did a few other things, who worked on Dead and Buried, Return of the Living Dead. So there was a lot of talent that was working on this movie in the cast and in the crew, and it definitely shows. One of the most shining examples, one of the best things about C.H.U.D, and one of the most memorable things about it, are the C.H.U.Ds themselves. Originally, John Callaghan, he was thinking that maybe should make the C.H.U.Ds look a little bit more human, but then the producers wanted more of a monster look, with big hands with claws and monstrous faces and stuff like that. And he worked hard along with Ed French, Ed French did a lot of the stuff where he did a lot of the aftermath gore, and Callaghan was responsible for doing the creature suits, and his crew was responsible for that kind of stuff. Boxell, he was a guy who was responsible for working on the creature designs and the mechanical stuff, or at least helping with it. And it was a nice collaboration. It was a collaborative effort by everyone involved. And I don't understand the criticism this film gets from people nowadays, because I've seen this. I've seen this on reviews. I've seen this on videos people have done talking about C.H.U.D, and they're talking about how cheesy the effects look and how bad they are. And I don't really get that, because I've always thought that the C.H.U.D effects were always pretty impressive. I thought the creature suits by John Callaghan, I thought they were impressive for the time. I didn't really get why they were considered to be bad. I've seen bad makeup effects. C.H.U.D doesn't have bad makeup effects. For a $1 million production, these are some really high-end makeup effects. John and his crew did a wonderful, just remarkable, great job with the foam latex that you see in the film. Ed French's aftermath gore is equally as impressive as well, because watching this film again in the high definition print that's on this Blu-ray, the scene where there's like the severed head on the ground, it looked extremely photorealistic. I could not tell that was a fake head, that wasn't a real severed head. That's how effective and how great French's work was with that particular effect. And I missed that. Nowadays it's CGI, and they're going to filter shit and do all this other crap and make it look even faker than it really is supposed to. In a lot of ways it might have been thanks to the lighting, because that's a big thing. Lighting is a big thing when it comes to the effectiveness of a makeup effect. If it's not lit correctly, you can really tell how fake it is. But that's not the case with the aftermath gore by Ed French or with the creature effects by John Callaghan. And I got to give a lot of kudos to the creature actors, the guys who were in the suits, because they were out there during one of the hottest periods in New York's history, over 100 degrees, just absolutely sweltering in terms of the temperature, and they're out there in these heavy, hot foam latex suits doing their best, acting. They could only work for like 2 hours a time because of how hot it was outside when they shot the sequences with the C.H.U.Ds. The film also features some really impressive cinematography, just a really, the type of cinematography that gets kind of overlooked by some people. Just a very grand, outstanding job by Peter Stein, who had done cinematography for Friday the 13th Part 2 before this, and he would go on to do cinematography for other movies like Necessary Roughness, as well as Pet Sematary. And he really does get the most out of the film's grimy locations. The film has this just grimy, gritty look to it, which really just enhances the mood and the atmosphere. The score by Martin Cooper and David A. Hughes is another thing that really enhances the mood and atmosphere of the movie of C.H.U.D. It's this nice synth score that creates this permeating sense of dread throughout the movie. And for the most part, it's a really well-paced film. According to, depending on what source you look at or what version of the film you watch, the running time differs. So the theatrical cut was 88 minutes, which is actually pretty short, actually. The theatrical cut is, it's 88 minutes. And the integral cut is 96 minutes. And that is that is the preferred cut because everything flows a lot better. And for a 96-minute long movie, it doesn't drag. There isn't any moments where the film drags. It always keeps your interest. It always keeps you latched onto and intrigued and motivated to see where things go and to see how the film ends. So there's just so many things to love about this movie. Another thing that I absolutely love about this film is the cast. The cast is another big reason why the film feels like it's more than just a low-budget production. Like it's more than just a low-budget, cheesy B-movie, which a lot of people kind of give it that connotation or they give it that title. And I disagree with that. I don't think it's cheesy at all. But the cast is great. You have these really accomplished actors. You got John Hurd, plays George Cooper, my favorite role of his career. He's a very likable character. He's not perfect. He's a little bit rough around the edges with some aspects of his character, but they handle it really well, so he never really feels like he's an asshole or anything like that. Excuse me. Yeah, he doesn't really feel like he's an asshole or anything like that. And Daniel Stern, this is also one of my favorite roles of his career as the Reverend. He's this guy who runs a soup kitchen and helps out the homeless people who live underground. And he gets roped up in all of this and this conspiracy with the Chuds and so on. And he and John Hurd have to band together to survive the Chuds when they're locked underground and try to find a way out before it's too late, before they're Chud Chow. Christopher Curry is an actor who ended up on the project, and I believe Daniel Stern or John Hurd, either one of I don't remember if it was Daniel Stern or was it John Hurd, but one of them basically told the producers, we're not going to be in the movie unless you let Christopher Curry play Captain Bosch. And I believe it was John Hurd who really wanted Christopher Curry. Because John Hurd came from a theater background, and Christopher Curry was a theater actor, an accomplished theater actor at the time. And he was signed onto the cast, and the rest is history. And I really like his character, and I like his performance. It's the type of actor you don't see nowadays, the type of blue-collar guy. He was very believable when it comes to playing a police officer. And he was just the type of actor you don't see anymore, and I miss that type of guy. He was just a regular guy. The same thing for John Hurd and Daniel Stern. These are regular guys. These weren't supermodels. These weren't Abercrombie and Fitch models. These weren't underwear models. These were normal-looking guys, which really helped you relate to them. Kim Griest also does an equally great job as everyone else in the cast in one of her first roles as, I believe it was her acting debut as Lauren Daniels. She's a underrated heroine in a lot of ways. Like, she isn't really the lead, but she gets stuff done. She's not a complete weakling. She's not dead weight. She actually fends off one of the Chuds on her own and cuts off its head with a sword. So she's actually resourceful, and that's one thing that I also really liked about her character. And it was a good performance as well, and she had some nice chemistry with John Hurd. And the villain is played with just wonderful, subtle, maniacal glee by George Martin, who plays Wilson, the government's garbage man in the film. You have a fun cameo by John Goodman as one of the cops in the diner who ends up getting eaten by the C.H.U.Ds in one scene. And it was nice to see John Goodman, and you could see that this was an actor who's going to go places just with this cameo, because you could just see and just feel his personality. Like, this is just a fun guy you wanted to hang out with, and you knew that there was potential there from the beginning because of, what you saw in just such a short sequence. The film is not jam-packed with blood and guts. There's a lot of aftermath shots, and the C.H.U.Ds do a lot of things where they kill people off screen, or a lot of stuff kind of happens off screen in order to help, hide the film's low budget. But it would have been nice to see more C.H.U.D kills, to see more scenes of the C.H.U.Ds and see them do a little bit more, because you don't see that much. That's one thing that I feel that the film is lacking a little bit. If there was anything that the film was really lacking, it was something like that. A little bit more C.H.U.Ds would have been nice, and a little bit more scenes where they're attacking people or ripping limbs off or decapitating people or something. That would have been nice to see. I also felt the ending felt like it was a bit abrupt. Like, not too abrupt, but it just felt like there wasn't a clear resolution to things. Did the C.H.U.Ds all die? Did they all get gassed out? Did they get burned by the explosion? What happened to the C.H.U.Ds? Are they all dead? I don't know. And also, is Captain Bosch still alive? I know he said nice shot, but was that the last words he said before he died or something? It says he's still alive on things like Wikipedia and things like that, but you don't see him go to the hospital. You don't see anything happen like that. So I guess I can assume he's still alive, but I don't know. So it's one of those things where it's not as clear as it could be. It's not anything that's like super bad or anything that's like a really big deal, but it's just something that I did notice. But really, I mean, other than that, I mean, those are only the problems I had with it. I mean, I'm kind of struggling to come up with any cons. As you can see, like, I'm kind of scrambling a little bit, and I apologize. But that's because I don't really find that much wrong with this movie. To really knock it down that much in terms of its rating or in terms of the overall quality of the movie. I think C.H.U.D is, like I said, I think it's a classic. I think it's an unsung classic, an underrated classic, a unheralded, underrated horror film that I truly do feel a lot of people should check out for themselves if they haven't already. This is one that I highly recommend. I highly recommend C.H.U.D to anyone who's watching this video who hasn't seen it. And if you have seen it, check it out again. I mean, it's definitely worth another watch, and it's worth many watches if you ask me. It's one of those movies that really did show the independent spirit, the type of film that you don't see get made nowadays, and it also showed a side of New York that no longer exists. This is a film shot during a time period where New York, there actually were sections of it that were seedy. There were sections of it that were full of grime and dirt, and you could really get the most out of the location, and the settings themselves would end up becoming a character, and you really don't have that in New York nowadays. So this is a nice time capsule for a portion and a part of New York's history, and also a part of New York itself that is no longer around, that you can no longer witness. And the overall concept is just great. Underground dwellers, these C.H.U.Ds who live underground, under the city, and it taps into the whole urban legends that a lot of people remember of things like the alligators in the sewers, but this time it's these big mutated monsters that want to eat you. And the film also has some really genuinely clever, brilliant concepts, not only just with that, but with other things as well. With the character of Wilson, and with the whole cover-up and all of that, and of course with what the acronym C.H.U.D actually stands for. Which I don't want to give away because I want people to actually see the film for themselves and actually discover that reveal and to experience that reveal for the first time without it being ruined. But yeah, this is just a great film, and I know I've said that many times over. I sound like a broken record, but it really is. It's a very notable, major motion picture. I really do feel that way, and it's a film that I am really glad to have in my collection, and it's a film that I'm really glad got a Blu-ray release. So I don't know what else to say about C.H.U.D, except if I was going to rate it out of 5 stars, and I would give the movie 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there's only a couple problems I have with it, but they're nothing too major. Overall, it's a spectacularly solid movie that shows you that you don't have to have a big budget to make a memorable classic movie that can be enjoyed by people for years and years to come. So, anyway, thanks for watching my review of C.H.U.D, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya. Hey there! Welcome to a special bonus Easter egg portion of this review. For those of you who have stuck around to this point, you're in for a treat. This is something I'm going to be starting to do more often now with particular titles that I feel are worthy of this extra little nugget of fun. And if you are interested or at all curious on hearing my thoughts on the C.H.U.D Blu-ray, then stick around, because that's coming up. If you're not interested in that and you're not curious about it, that doesn't interest you, thanks for watching, and you can click off, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But for those of you who want to stick around, let's get started. The Blu-ray from Arrow Video was a gift from Jonathan Lindsay, so I want to give him a shout out and a thanks. A big thanks for the Blu-ray. And this is a really solid release. I really think this is one of the better releases, one of the best releases I have that I have seen personally from Arrow's American arm of their company. This is a great looking Blu-ray. It's a really sturdy case. Like all of their Blu-rays, you have the option of having the original poster cover art as your display artwork, or you can have this artwork that was commissioned and that's not the original poster cover art. You can have something like that if you so choose. I prefer the poster art because it's one of my favorite posters. I just love the poster. I've always loved it. So that's why I have the poster art instead of the custom artwork. But it's an option that's available to you if you would like to switch the cover art. The Blu-ray also comes with this nice, informative, fun booklet, which has a nice little essay of sorts written by Michael Gingold, where he talks about various pieces of information on the making of the movie, which is actually really informative and really interesting. And it also has a bunch of photos and stuff from the film in there as well. But a lot of the juiciest portions of this booklet are the stuff with Michael Gingold, and it's really good. And it's a nice little bonus for C.H.U.D fans, and it's a nice bang for your buck. I would say Arrow Video, since I have a region free player and I've had one for a while now, and now that they're in America, I would have to say that they are the best company, the best distribution company when it comes to releasing these niche titles, these horror and sci-fi titles. I love their presentation of their box sets. I love the presentation of their individual Blu-rays. Their transfers are top notch and have been for many years. And I give them a slight nod over Scream Factory, even though Scream Factory has done a lot of just amazing Blu-rays. Arrow goes the extra mile, and I'm really glad that there's an American portion of the company now, so that people in the States can experience the awesomeness of Arrow for themselves. The booklet is something that you don't see from Scream Factory. They don't do that. Now, the discs themselves, you have the theatrical cut, which is remastered in 1080p. The integral cut, which is the best cut of the film, and it's remastered in 2K. And all of the features are on the integral cut. I don't believe there's any on the theatrical cut. And the theatrical cut apparently is on a limited edition of this, but I don't know if this is even a limited edition. Now, it also includes a absolutely just a really cool bonus feature that you don't see very often on releases of any film on Blu-ray. You have the isolated score, and then you also have interviews with the composers. So that is a really unique and innovative feature, which I thought was really cool. You also have the wonderful audio commentary that is ported over from the previous DVD release, which is one of the best audio commentary tracks I've ever heard. Like, you could tell that these guys really enjoyed watching the film again and talking about it and talking about their experiences working on the movie. And it's such an infectious audio commentary because it's like you're there in the same room with them, and it just makes the film even more fun to watch in a lot of ways. Like, the movie is still a very entertaining, great film on its own, but you know, when you have all these cast members who were in the movie talking about the film and giving you nice little bits of information and trivia about it and sharing these stories, it's just a very fun experience, and it takes things to a whole nother level. It's got everybody. You got Douglas Cheek, the director. You got a writer, Shepard Abbott. You got John Hurd, Daniel Stern, and Christopher Curry. So it's just a really nice audio commentary. And audio commentaries are fairly overlooked when it comes to special features. And I can see why, because most of the time they're just kind of dry and bland. But this isn't one of those cases. So, and I'm really glad it was ported over to this release, because there's a lot of instances where stuff doesn't get ported over at all. And thankfully, though, that isn't the case with this. Then there's some actual interviews, on-camera interviews with people involved with the film. You have a really fascinating interview with the production designer, whose name is William Billowit. And it was really cool to hear that there's a connection between C.H.U.D, which is one of my favorite horror films, with my favorite horror film of all time, in Creepshow, because William Billowit worked on Creepshow. He was a production assistant on Creepshow. He worked on the They're Creeping Up on You segment, as well as the Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, and he worked on the grass effects and things like that. So that was really cool to hear that connection that I had no idea about, and it was really nice to hear from William about all the different tricks and all the different things that he did, and all the ways that they stretched the budget, and how the production and design and art directors created the sets and things like that they used for the film, where they had they rented a loft apartment in New York, which now rents for like millions of dollars, and they built the sewer sets inside this loft, and they had the styrofoam bricks and all this other stuff, and they had to be ingenious, they had to think on their feet in order to create these sets. And it's just the kind of stuff that I love seeing this kind of stuff, because it's a lost art, and it also just shows you how innovative and how ingenious a lot of these production and art designers had to be back in the 80s, and especially it's really impressive, especially for a low budget production. And there's another interview with the makeup effects artist and creature creator, John Calagone. And that's a short but sweet one. And he talks about how he had a lot of fun working on the film. It was kind of his first big creature feature, like his first big horror movie where he was the main guy, and it was a lot to do, and it was a pretty huge undertaking, but it was something that he was really excited to do and was really proud of his work on the film. You get some really nice little pictures where you show kind of the process and the artistry that's behind makeup effects. It's another lost art, and I love makeup effects. I love makeup practical effects. I love reading about makeup practical effects, and I love seeing featurettes and interviews with makeup effects artists, and I love seeing the process of how they create these creatures and how they create the gore and how they do all this stuff. And that was I would have to say my favorite feature, other than the audio commentary on this Blu-ray, is the interview with John Calagone. It was really wonderful to hear from him and hear his anecdotes and his point of view when it comes to the production of C.H.U.D. And then there's like notes from above ground, the NYC locations of C.H.U.D, where you just have this kind of locations thing where Michael Gingold and the director Ted Geoghegan, who I don't know if I said his last name correctly, he's the guy who directed We Are Still Here, which I still haven't seen. And they go in and revisit some of the locations where the film was shot, and it's pretty eye-opening because everything looks different. There's nothing that really looks the same, which makes sense. Excuse me, but also shows you how much things have changed in New York City over the years. There's a behind-the-scenes gallery of pictures that's pretty cool to look at. There's an extended shower scene, which really all it does is show nudity, I think. It doesn't really add that much. It's kind of disappointing because you're thinking like, extended shower scene, oh, is like more blood or more gore, or no, it's just, there's really not much there. The really awesome, really cool original theatrical trailer, which is one of my favorite trailers ever, because I just love the narration and I love the way it's structured. And then you have the booklet and everything. So, yeah, it's a really solid release. I highly recommend it to fans of the film. Most fans of the film already have this, but if you're a fan of the film and you don't have it yet, pick it up. It's definitely worth buying, and it's definitely worth being in your collection. And for those of you curious about the film, I also recommend it too. I mean, if you're curious about the movie, it's actually a pretty good buy. And also, even if you blind buy it, if it's just something that sounds interesting to you and you haven't seen the film, this is a great release. It's a good Blu-ray to pick up. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the C.H.U.D Blu-ray. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. See ya.